So hello and welcome back to Climbing on Mount Sophia. Today I'm doing something a little bit different than what I'm often doing, which is like philosophy, religion kind of stuff, and trying to come down a level to talk about some real world issues and an approach that my friend Tyler has come up with, that he's trying to work with. How do we control for one of the variables that we're facing in just kind of the tangible material day-to-day life that we all get to live. So Tyler and I got to know each other on Twitter a little bit, and he has kind of an interesting working model coming together for how to possibly deal with the issue of cancel culture. So welcome, Tyler. Maybe just tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we can start talking about this idea that you've had.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me on. So yeah, a little bit about myself, but I guess it kind of blends into the origin story behind the project is, there's no formal qualifications for doing what I'm doing. So the career background doesn't matter, but we'll start maybe around 2018-ish when I started stumbling across YouTube videos, as one does, and finds themselves in a rabbit hole, and into kind of like the related channels that we're all familiar with here. And the trend that I saw was,
and I'm guessing you're talking about like Jordan Peterson, John Vervaeke, that kind of crew.
Yeah, Vervaeke came later, but yeah,
okay.
the first one, Jordan Peterson, was opening the door for many of those things, being the most prominent one. So I forget exactly when Brett Weinstein's cancellation happened and where exactly along the timeline happened when Peterson first burst onto the scene. But the general trend of like late 2017, early 2018 was me discovering all these very interesting people and people who I don't find interest in and I don't find much appeal in, trying to ruin them. So this also happened on the heels of Louis C.K.'s cancellation. And there's Brett's Evergreen situation. And then while Peterson maybe wasn't formally canceled, I was just watching the book tour he was on and just the general opposition to it. So the kind of way that I'm looking at it in hindsight is, so there's really only a limited amount of things that I care about in this world. So they try to take away Brett, which is trying to take away learning and exploring the universe. Taking away Louis, humor and being able to laugh at horrible things. And then I was kind of putting together, I would watch in sequence like those old Jordan Peterson compilations. Like, if you don't like Jordan Peterson, watch this. And like, regardless of any of your other opinions, like it was like answering like an adult, like an adult who had like an adult child kill themselves, and like talk to them like and give them advice over, hey, how do we get over our daughter's suicide? And you're trying to take away human decency, and you're trying to crush him because of whatever worldview that you have. So that was the origin of the project. I kind of synthesized all three of those things, and I had a lot of time on my hands, and I'm kind of a monomaniacal person, and I started thinking of ways that I could stop that.
Yeah. So let me stop there, because like this is, so you, like, for you, it almost sounds like, as much as, I don't know, what I hear you saying is that you weren't upset necessarily about the content of the people who were being canceled, although you had found value in it, and maybe the people who were trying to cancel them didn't provide as much value. But it wasn't necessarily about the reasons they were being canceled or not canceled. It was just like the fact that you saw this happening for what seemed like illegitimate reasons was almost as much of a driving force for you as anything else. Is that right?
Yeah, the reasons that were given, I didn't really care about. What they provided underneath the reasons is what I cared about.
Can you say more about that?
So the reason that they gave Brett, well, I guess the reasons are kind of legitimate because of the ridiculousness of the reasons that were given. So like whether Brett was like called a racist for not leaving campus for a day because he's white, like that, I mean, I guess, that played a role because, I mean, you heard what I just said, so you understand it's silly. But he's a biology professor and he's teaching about evolution. That's important. Don't take that away from people. What Peterson was providing, and again, like he has the like a massive amount of content out now, but that sort of first initial archetypal helping struggling young men try to piece together, trying to fit the world together, and then just doing live streams where he answers people's advice like, hey, my daughter killed themselves, what do I do about it? I like that. And then what Louis provided the role, which comedy in general, which is like trying to take that away. And there's a reason why when these socio-political trends intensify, that comedy always comes under fire. So I like all of those things, basically. It's my reason. I'm not sure if that's too general for what you were looking for, but
yeah. Well, I just I don't know. I think there's something kind of fundamental. There's like a fundamental bifurcation point at this question of like, should it be possible to cancel people as like just as a thing? And that's one of the things that I don't know. I guess I sometimes feel that maybe just that thinking that, oh, this person shouldn't get to talk, even just the fact that that's a thing on the board for you, no matter where you're at on the political spectrum, because people on both sides are often trying to shut the others down, right? They both want to deplatform other people, but just that as a bifurcation point is a big thing. Like if you really get there and really understand that, it seems like the whole issue of cancellation almost becomes a place to differentiate between kind of the spirits of two crowds, you might say.
Yeah, and maybe I like this first thing I'm going to mention could blend into some like the broader things, but like there was the moral reasons that I just gave of these high-minded principles or whatever that I have, and this like profundity of how crucial it is to my life or whatever. But and then there's the broader existential stuff of just like where we're heading as a species, and if you narrow the scope of thought and you take all these outliers and you direct this mob to kill all these people that whatever their downsides are interesting and are thinking in interesting ways, then you're dooming whatever hope we have to achieve game B and solve these problems that we're coming into. And I think the way that I put it once was like in order to build game B, you need the people capable of building game B. So that's a precondition for it. So I identified that as a motivating factor, but also if you want to just because you're talking about the bifurcation of stuff, like also just my selfish reasons, because again, the reasons that they gave are not necessarily the reasons that are real. The reason that they gave was that Brett, whatever, was racist. Again, it doesn't matter. What matters is that their personal interest was, I want this person gone. Mm-hmm. So despite all of my like layers of analysis of this is why I'm doing it, this is why I'm doing it, my personal reason is, well, I don't. So it just selfishly, I don't, and I don't think that their reasons for doing it are much more sophisticated than mine. So I guess we can just establish a contest of wills here.
I see. Interesting. Okay. So where are you at now with the project? What is it that you're proposing and what does it look like?
Sure. So I talk to a lot of different types of people about this, and I always try to keep track of where to attack this from.
Yeah.
So this whole cancellation insurance idea. So it didn't work even conceptually like regular insurance. But the trends that we kind of just identified happening, I saw a small minority using control of institutions to enforce conformity from above. So I thought, what's the opposite of that? Because I know, because everybody you talk to, like in your social sphere, nobody's really a fan of it. I mean, I kind of took it to an extreme, but everybody's kind of groaning. So I'm like, how could we harness the power of the majority to broaden the scope of discussion and help and counter the forces forcing them in from below, how to support dissent from below. So I thought of just using, social networks to achieve that, and almost as a sort of, people use GoFundMe after something bad happens. But I thought, what if you could do that ahead of time? So what my kind of basic premise is you would pledge to somebody without, or actually I'll do another analogy. So if somebody said, hey, I have cancer and I need surgery, then that's easy to pay money for. But doing it ahead of time is not really a great deal. You can't say, would you give me $5 now in case I need surgery? So with this whole cancellation thing, especially because it's a pretty, vague, broad thing, what would happen is somebody who is concerned about getting canceled would set the scope of what will count as a canceling for them. Hey, if I get kicked off of Patreon, hey, if I get demonetized from YouTube, hey, if I lose my job. And then people who would like to support them would pledge to donate to them if that scenario occurs. But no money leaves on the spot. It's more of a locked-in financial commitment. We'll take the payment info, but that way, and I'll kind of cut myself off here without going too far into the weeds of all this stuff. That way, because while I'm not, a content creator or anybody prominent like that, I do like to consume people's content and support people, but I can only pay $5 a month to so many people on Patreon or Substack or anything else. There's lots of people I like that I don't financially support. But if I had to hypothetically bail them out of a situation that may not even happen, instead of paying $5 a month, say, hey, I'll give you $20 in case you need it, especially because that pushes back against everything that I hate. That's a better deal for me as an audience member.
So, yeah, I guess in some sense, from the big picture, it's an attempt to build resiliency into the lower orders of the societal system, such that you can do kind of like guerrilla warfare in a sense in kind of the information landscape.
Yeah, actually, and yeah, this is the kind of stuff that I enjoy talking about. Some people get in more of my business oriented conversations, I try to keep the word war out of it. But yeah,
it's okay.
another framework
I think hopefully if people who are watching this on my channel don't understand what I mean by information war and spiritual warfare, there's some of my other videos you should probably watch. But that, I mean, that for me, that means something really, really concrete. There's a level of reality on which ideas are battling it out, right? And that is the landscape of the human mind, which is, and their power is literally the amount of attention that they're given by all the people whose consciousness they run on, right? So when you're playing in that landscape, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. We're trying to build a resiliency network. It sounds like, I don't want to project this onto you, but what I'm hearing from you is you're attempting to build a resiliency network in the material world, because there's a way in which the material world is trying to force a win in that world for a certain set of ideas.
Yeah, and this goes right into the point that I was just about to make, so I'm glad you phrased it like that. So not so material, because material physical world, I mean, this is mostly there are ways to socially support people. My plan, it's mostly financial and social. So you get people into the network with a financial promise, then you have the basis for social cooperation, so you can address that as well. But I mean, mostly ideas historically have been enforced via physical violence. So the answer that we had there, the quote unquote insurance policy for physical violence that we had is the Second Amendment, where if the government says, hey, I command you to do something at the point of a gun, you say, oh, I have a gun too, so I don't feel like it. So one step short of that is the financial and social coercion. So we don't really have we don't really have physical militias anymore, but again, theoretically, so we don't really have any sort of coordination point to counter the financial and social coercion. So I took a concept from John Robb, who is again has a foot in these circles, and about the idea of open source insurgency, and how that's held together via a plausible promise, or just a generally realistic goal that can unite disparate elements within the insurgency. So the example in Iraq would be uniting the disparate tribes would be get the United States out of Iraq. The thing that got Trump elected would be, hey, get Trump elected. A lot of people would disagree on other things. So I figured a decent, plausible promise was push back against cancel culture and kind of support this effort from afar without incurring any risk yourself. That felt like a decent coordination point to me.
Yeah. So in the okay, I like that. I like that. I mean, I think that's really like I think it's a much brighter idea than I think I've had in terms of how to make real meaningful bulwarks in that kind of realm, um against the onslaught from that level. Because I just like I often look at that landscape and I'm like, I don't really know what to do here. So I guess I'll just kind of like, have some animals and have been somewhat careful with my resources such that I, can live, but like I haven't really done anything to make sense of how we might band together a little bit. But anyway, I was gonna move on to asking about so when you have it as the notion being that individual creators would be setting up this cancellation insurance, and then people could pledge to specific ones, not kind of a general pool, or would there be kind of both?
So first of all, I do want to support content creators, but I have like no personal such affinity where I'm like, I want to help creators over anybody else. I want to help everybody.
Okay. So
But
that wouldn't have to be like an online personality even necessarily. It could be somebody who's like, hey, I have this job in this space that, if I stand up for what I believe in, it's going to be, I'm putting my neck out there. Something like that could even come on.
They could. I don't think that they'd have a lot of success with it right away, because the reason why creators can take advantage of it is because they have a network ready to be tapped, like at a moment's notice. So my at least approach to it was start with creators, and then again, it requires, for more average types of people, it requires a little bit more network effects for benefits to kick in. So my idea was start with creators who bring audiences with them, motivated audiences, aligned audiences that are also predisposed to spread this around and make it a little bit more popular, because I know, because I'm one of those audiences. And then there's without getting too deep into the weeds, but another thing was maybe smaller to mid-sized creators that are kind of almost in a similar boat to regular people, where they're like, I have a bit of a network, but like not enough to save my life. Pretty much the first update that we would like to roll out a couple months down the line is a way for them to pool resources together, where at least as a sort of mutual aid fund, similar to that. And then so then maybe a network or maybe a small group of like 10 to 20 creators could at least establish the benefits for some that none would be able to do individually. And then it kind of broadens out from there. Then after that, there's the means to maybe do, again, a similar type of function I just described, but in a larger group of people that are like maybe aligned professionals in a very hostile environment, whether that's big tech or academia. The idea I came up for that was like decentralized autonomous unions, because like academics pay union dues. I don't know what they do. But like, I mean, I guess the general idea behind that, again, not to get too far into this point, but like, you pay like some sort of monthly due, like in case your relationship with your employer deteriorates. Like it doesn't seem to be doing much. But anyway, so that was the idea behind that. So then eventually, hopefully the network grows to the point where then you just have a swarm of people to mobilize on behalf of anybody.
Yeah, I mean, that would be awesome, right? Like theoretically, if you could have, say, everyone bought into a system, or at least to some degree, a willing part of a system that allowed them to truly feel comfortable expressing like something that they feel is divergent from the baseline, like you're not going to get an enforcement of the baseline for very long, because it doesn't take that many people questioning the narrative, if the narrative is false, for it to fall apart. I mean, if the narrative is true, then like this is why free speech is actually the best thing, because if the narrative is true, people can say whatever weird things they want and they just won't stick.
Yeah. There's a reason why some people scramble to, there's a reason why there's so much fear emanating from people who seemingly have a lot more political and you're like just a lot more power in general than, I don't want to say I'm like the only one, but just I'm the only brain that I have access to. So but there's a reason why they're really scared of seemingly powerless people, and when I talk about my opinions, I'm not. So there's that point, and then another, or because you're touching on the pretty much raising. Actually, I won't touch on this. I'll touch on this point that you just kind of led into. Once enough people start saying no, because that's really the whole idea behind it. Like apart from the whole financial aspect, it's to, there's some level of security that exists that we haven't hit yet, to where preference cascades start to form. So, and I always love that that there can be a whole intricate network of mechanisms lined up to get people to do preference falsification, and it can take decades, like in the Soviet Union. And then what happens is just, bless you, by the way. What happens is
barely got the mute in time.
I know I didn't hear it, but I saw it on the side of my eye. So, but then it just collapses in an instant, or a relative instant. Everybody drops the shit like within a matter of weeks. And the people didn't predict the fall of the Berlin Wall like months ahead of time. So that level of security isn't reached yet, and there is no hard number, but it does exist. So this attempt is to kind of start inching towards that level of security, to where it also doesn't take much for things to catch on. Like going back to Jordan Peterson again, like obviously he has these oceans of content that have sustained him since he first burst on the scene. Well, that first burst happened because people saw that video of him just yelling at a bunch of students who were but yelling back like in a meaningful way towards people who were yelling at him in a non-meaningful way. And people saw that and it resonated with them. They're like, I don't know much about this guy, but I like your vibe, man. So just like, so, and then they looked into the video and, or, who he was, and were caught on after that. So it doesn't take that many people, Well,
and I think that's like one of the important things to note is that this claim is off. There's this claim that often comes up that somehow free speech, or this push for free speech, is a part of a specific ideology. That's one of the ways that it gets clamped down on, or sidelined, because it's like, oh well, this is wrapped up with these people who just want to say all these terrible, mean, hurtful things, right? And I think it's important to point out that it's not like the freedom of speech can't possibly be associated with any ideology, like fundamentally.
It can be in opposition to a lot of them, but also, and maybe
it's opposition to ideology as such, I would say.
I agree. And I when you were listing the reasons that they gave, just like, hey, it gives people permission to be, and maybe do we still have to have that conversation? Like, this is something I'm like a meaningful thing to, like, it's not 2017 anymore. We still have to engage. We still have to engage in this farce, like people who happen to talk with an air of moral and intellectual superiority actually possess either one, and it's not the opposite way. Do we still have to play this game? I mean, maybe in these conversations we don't. I understand the broader population, maybe. But yeah, it's pretty clear this is a bad thing, and the lies that were given were in fact lies.
Yeah, it's weird, man. Like I get a lot of feedback from just like average society, right? Because I do medicine, and when you do medicine, you see patients from the whole span.
I actually did not know that, by the way. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and it's wild. Like it's really wild to see where people are at. Like the scatter plot is unreal because people will make little comments, right? And you can pretty much, there's only a few categories of people around for the most part. Now and then you get somebody who's doing something different, but like there's most people are running, one of like 5 programs mainly.
It's fun sussing that out, and then like if you detect like somebody trying, that's somebody who like you think you know their opinions, but there's like a level of fear they're waiting for like somebody else's permission to say the thing or get somebody else to say the thing first so they can say their thing they've been wanting to say. I love that in an
Yeah.
interpersonal, just like regular setting.
Yeah. 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 So I don't know. I mean, it's yeah. It's interesting to see how, I don't know. I think there's so many people, like you said, that just because there's so much just kind of vague fear associated with speaking too much or saying the wrong thing, then people just don't do it at all. And they get used to not doing it at all. And then pretty slowly there's just a lot of things that people don't talk about. You just can't talk about it.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, even though I phrase those types of interactions like they don't always end up positive. You throw out like you say something that you think like will be safe, and sometimes it opens the doors, but other times people are like, dude, don't say that. Like they don't like it. People mostly don't yeah, they don't like there's the boundaries of the Overton window is like a straitjacket to a lot of people, but other people kind of see it as like a safety blanket. Like they
Yeah.
know the rules. It establishes order. And it's getting increasingly constricting for most people. But whereas you're trying to offer a hand of like freedom, like you don't have to live like this. I mean, you don't have to say stuff as openly as me, but you don't need to live like the way you're doing now. And people will slap that hand away a lot of times. And I'm kind of confused when it happens, but I also get it to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems, I mean, at least in the people in my life, like, COVID did it for a lot of people. Like it pushed them over the edge to where they were like, okay, I can't buy the narrative anymore. There's something more going on in the world than what I've believed for all my life. And I have
Yeah,
lots of people around me who are, in their 50s or 60s, or, one of the, populations in that patient population are people like that. And now oftentimes they've just jumped to a different narrative than though they were on the one before. But sometimes they really, come online and start paying attention to these things. And so I'm curious about like, so let's say I was to set up an account with you. Like what would it look like with the cancellation insurance?
sure. So you would, I mean, hop on the site, which is not
Is it up
completely
and running now?
active. It is, but not in its functional format that it will be a month from now when we release the MVP. It's mostly
Okay.
just a landing page with the sign up page, but you can go to becomepluribus.com. There are too many other things named Pluribus, but that is, but actually I did end up liking the domain name because the reason that we're calling it Pluribus, oh, by the way, I'm all completely out of order. It's called Pluribus, by the way. So the reason why I called it that is because obviously it's a nod to E pluribus unum, but by itself it means like many or more. So it's to harness the power. I mean, most people above 90% at least are not fans of this. So if you participate in such a thing like this, then you can become more than kind of the sum of our parts are now. And we can actually start acting and like a majority opinion should begin to act. Um, and I know that within that majority opinion lies a whole ocean of different opinions. I'm talking about the opinion that those opinions should be able to be spoken, which is an important distinction. So you go on the site, open up an account, and then define. Again, I'm not sure if YouTube is whatever point of your highest concern is that bugs you, and you're like, boy, I really wish that this didn't happen. So set the parameters for it, and then invite people to. So you type in, hey, if I would like protection in case I get demonetized. So there's a lot of we're providing the minimal amount of structure and then letting creators customize it to their needs. Because at the end of the day, and I'll go into kind of the obvious questions of what if somebody lies or abuses it in a second. At the end of the day, the situation differs between creators a lot, but their audiences also know them. So it'll mostly be self-regulating. If you throw out some really weird stuff that really doesn't fit your character, people will know and not pledge to donate to you. So anyway, you establish that, people pledge to donate to you, and then let's say YouTube comes down, cracks down on your channel, demonetizes you, and that is the scenario that you wanted protection against. So a notice would go out to everybody who pledged to donate to you that this has in fact occurred. Now, we have to balance the concerns of both sides here, because again, you could be lying. There's no proof, like mechanically speaking, of hey, this definitely happened. So the mechanism that we're going to use, because people that pledge don't want to be defrauded, and people that want protection don't want the rug pulled out from under them too easily. So bringing the veracity of the claims up to a vote seemed a little bit too up in the air for your party, for creators. So the idea was that the assumption is that all claims are legitimate unless more than 50% of people who pledge to donate object to it. They have to go out of their way and go, hey, I don't believe this. But the resting, passive assumption, if they don't do anything, is yeah, I'm cool with this. Because if they're cool with it, I mean, they don't really need to do anything. But if you behaved in a way in a really out of character manner, and clearly, you have some set of money waiting for you, and then you really push the envelope on YouTube and stuff you don't usually say, then people will object to it. And then so that's the baseline mechanism. And then there's a whole lot of different situations of appeals and second votes and other things. But for the most part, as a base level, that should be sufficient for the majority of cases. And then there's other levels after it. But for the most part, again, I think it's self-regulating. How likely would you be to commit insurance fraud if the company was staffed by people that you know and everybody could see the process play out? So yeah, that's the baseline thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're working hard to try to mitigate the risk of fraudulent activity, which is great, because I mean, like you said, and that can become a blurry line, I'm sure, because if you're somebody who's already close to being demonetized and then you set it up and then your rhetoric changes just enough. Yeah, I mean, it's not without, I love that you're paying attention to it, because it is not a space that is without tripwires. Like it's pretty, there's all kinds of issues that can come up in this kind of environment.
Yeah, and that is why this doesn't exist. The game theoretic concerns, the moral hazards, this is why this doesn't exist. I had to spend eventually I got over it. But the first year of this, when the idea was in my head, I'm just like, this is so obvious, or addressing the whole cancellation issue is so obvious, and it affects the most intelligent, creative people. So if it doesn't exist, there's a reason, and therefore I shouldn't try. Again, I got over that, but this is the reason. And it's solvable. It's tricky, but when you release, it's not like releasing a bird into the wild and then you have no control over it. There's again, I've written a lot of just internal documents of what if this happens, how do you determine edge cases? There's any number of ways to happen, whether it's holding a vote in a jury system of randomly selecting 10 other users that have no dog in the fight to vote on it, versus having other creators vote on it because they are incentivized to assess claims because they want good behavior too, but they also sympathize with other creators. I'm not going to ramble too much. I'm just saying that there's ways to address this. There's the Jedi Council method of having, particularly well-regarded individuals, or not even publicly identifying them, just having like a secret high council that if a certain number of other users flag as inappropriate behavior, then they vote on that sort of stuff. And then there's, we want to do this as a last option, but one reason that we didn't go full decentralized crypto with this immediately is because of these various scenarios where you need some level of not so much us pushing anything in any certain direction, but hitting the big red button when it needs to be hit and kind of steering this thing until the collective intelligence of the network gets to the point where they can like be self-regulated. But these first initial steps, yeah, the last thing would be us going no. And then, whatever scenario, whatever loophole got exploited, patch that up, continue like a sort of common law thing where it's like, now that this thing happened, here's the baseline for that scenario, and then build on that until that happens less and less and less.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess on another hand too, like hopefully, like you pointed out in the beginning, hopefully this is a pretty rare scenario because I mean the whole notion or the whole like reason to be involved in this as such is because you're kind of understand the existential risk being taken by people to give voice to ideas that you believe in, right? Like, so you would hope that having a layer of trust in a system like that would actually be a positive, because trust, I mean, mutual trust is one of the most powerful things there is when it actually exists. It's just we live in a world that's so paranoid now because it's been so exploited that we don't really remember what that's like. We immediately have to start planning our trust minimization methods.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why, like, and when I say that there's this level of self-regulation to it, I'm not minimizing the things that have to be done, which is why I spent so much time on hypotheticals. But also why, like, at the end of the day, whatever I design in the lab is not guaranteed to work in the wild. So there needs to be like real world data fed back into it. But I mean, yeah, if something like this exists and it's relying on public trust and trust between two parties, and then really, I think like the more nuanced scenarios to prep for is like collusion between both of the parties to then do something bad. But at least as far as which I have answers for. But if something that like is built on trust and relies on trust, and then you flagrantly betray that trust, I mean, the network is not going to be kind to you. I mean, let's say that everything that I just described fails, and you successfully rip off your audience for whatever X amount of money. You're going to lose at least that amount of money because your career will be ruined. I mean, if you get your income via network, and part of the reason why cancellation works is because the network giveth and the network taketh away. So if you take it from the network, they can take it back.
Yeah. Wow, from that angle, how would you describe this machinery? From the angle where now the cancellation works by kicking you out of the network. It's almost like the attempt is to make it look like an organic upwelling, right, of being kicked out of the network, because this is not where the collective sense is heading, right? But the earlier model that you added was something more like those who are on the top of a decaying mountain, of a decaying adaptive mountain, or a niche mountain, are shooting at people who are trying to cross adaptive valleys.
Yeah. They work in coordination with people uprising from the slums. It's the top down, it's the top, like you said, it's the fake organic, just like, hey, the people want a great many things. The people only get listened to because they have a couple people that agree with them beneath the side. So if you have, again, because there's no shortage of collections of individuals that have a certain opinion. There's a whole lot of people that lobby Twitter that just say, hey, I would like this not to happen. And they only answer a certain amount of those that they happen to agree with. So yeah, it works in tandem.
Yeah, exactly. Huh. But that's interesting because that's like it's like one of the best. It's an ingenious approach for a parasitic idea system. I mean, because that's what an ideology really is, right? It's a parasite on some real host in the world of ideas, right? Because true ideas operate in an organic, self-organizing manner that move onward and upward, but like they can get, flipped somewhere inside and build a whole parasitic process.
It's so ingenious that I was thinking about when you said it. It's so ingenious that it even has whatever internal logic is. It actually makes it people don't appreciate it being identified as such. If I had to talk about like a certain group of people acting a certain sort of way, and it gets brought up over a dinner table of like again people who aren't as open about me about it, but they're just like, yeah, this is nonsense, or this is crazy, and then you're just like, yeah, I think they're all parasites. People experience that. Most people experience that as physically painful. They have a whole lot of alert systems in their head that go off as this is not a way to talk about this. I don't like it. I'm going to not really delve into it. So you're right. It is ingenious.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the thing that's so important there, right? Like that trigger is the trigger of the conflation of the person with the idea. And this is a problem that we've had for a long time. Like we have for a really long time had the problem that we always conflate the agent who's serving the idea or possessed by the idea with the idea itself. And this is like the core of, say, like Jesus, right? And the Christian idea is that you can win the war best by loving people and waking them up. And you don't, like, the war is not against the people who are serving the thing, right? Like if I have to fight an ideology and it's Nazi Germany, I'm going to lose a ton of people, and all those people are going to die, the good guys and the bad guys, let's say, right? But if instead I can go in and I can do, I don't know, like, it's not a psyop because it's not a controlled thing, but it's like if you can instead go in and like give every German soldier a copy of, I don't know, whatever thing that will really pull them out of the mind control of Nazism, and all of a sudden they all like realize that they're being controlled by it, like that's way better. Like nobody has to die.
Yeah, and I'll admit, I mean, maybe subconsciously, just because of how I grew up and like the software that I may or may not be aware of in my brain, but I didn't like have a Christian approach in the forefront of my mind doing this. But it occurred to me that if, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, if people with better ideas that apparent that also seem to be just generally talented, more admirable people, are generally they're losing to worse ideas because the incentive structure is rigged against them. All you have to do is protect them sufficiently for them to win. You don't need to make their ideas better. That part's covered. Instead of attacking all these people with worse ideas, they're just heads of a hydra, and you're just not sure what to go. All you do is like capture all the energy and animosity you have to your enemies, direct it to supporting your friends. Do that sufficiently enough, and you will win.
Yes. Yeah, because that's a really good way to say it, right? Because that's actually doing it, right? That's kind of harnessing together into a a team toward the good, right? Something like that. Like that's how the good actually becomes manifest. It's not in putting down what is seen as negative. It's in the linking together of others in a pursuit of the good.
Yeah, and I think it's going to come as a release, because it did to me too. Because people are figuring out what to do, and as events and time keep going on and things are not solved, like more and more things that were previously not really thought or talked about start entering the conversation. So this would be a valve, and again, I have very non-Christian sentiments towards this force that we're opposing. So the fact that if you know that sort of negative, non-Christian yet human part of you can be directed towards these positive ends, and then still get the outcome you want, and then still again like winning in a whatever, if that sounds cheap or shallow or whatever. But again, it kind of unites all that stuff for me. And then all you have to do is support people that you like.
Yeah. Yeah. The word Christian is always a loaded one, and always kind of a problem, right? Because there's so many ways in which what I just described is like not what people think of when they think of Christianity too. But yeah, no, I think you're right. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, you don't have to put it in any kind of mythical language for it to make sense. Like, literally just run an evolutionary model and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. The one, I'm trying to find a way to communicate this. So the one thing, or actually, I'm just gonna refer to something that I wrote in a Substack because it's just on the evolutionary strategy. So so yeah, it aligned with most evolutionary strategies because the playing a role of a heroic figure. There's a cross-cultural myth of okay, this is going into territory that the audience is familiar with. So yeah, the eternal cross-cultural myth is the hero arriving when like all seems lost or in like the darkest of times. So to me, evolutionarily speaking, that made sense because it doesn't, the high cost, high reward running the hero program usually doesn't make sense. There's also a limited amount of people that can run it. But as the environment deteriorates, you have to, again, like pull out all the stops. You're like, I didn't really have to do this set of behaviors, but I guess I'm going to have to. So again, most people aren't equipped for that. But if they can subsidize the risk and alter the environment that the hero is operating in and work in tandem with the hero, who is also acting as a functionary on their behalf for their benefit, as they're being ruled over by villains, because that's how it works. The story isn't that the hero deposes a less powerful villain, it's that he deposes a more powerful one. Then that's how you get the end of the story.
Yeah. It's like every hero movie you've ever seen, like where all the random people around that he's trying to save, or like even the cops are chasing him and stuff, and they don't know that it's actually in their best interest that he do well. Like, what if they all did and actively supported him instead?
Yeah, from the safety of their bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like it, man. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I mean,
Thank you, I appreciate it.
It'll be interesting to see how it works out in implementation. I'll plan to. I don't think, as far as I know, that I put too much on the line with my content right now, but maybe I'll sign up for like a sad dinner for myself if I were to get canceled off YouTube or something.
Yeah. Could I also say one thing? Because again, like a lot of people, like if it doesn't perfectly align with that exact thing,
Yeah.
like yeah, you don't even have to. And like there's a kind of an actual larger content creator that I spoke with who was into the idea, and his finances are safe, but is just happy to help. Will be happy to help with it if it helps bring more people in. Just the participation is what's important. It doesn't matter about your individual thing. Just And I think it will feel good once it starts to build. This sort of initial period will be the tricky part. And even though I want to say I'm fully aware that this is much easier said than done. But I think that, if it establishes the right sort of sentiment that a lot of people connect with, that it'll eventually be successful.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly plenty of people in the space, right? Like if you get, a few people who are kind of in this realm, like we tend to be just as an interconnected network, whether it's just this little corner of the internet, or I'm sure there's other, I don't know what you might call them, factions that have kind of similar landscapes to deal with. So yeah, best of luck with it. I'll be watching with interest and supporting however I can.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I think there's, again, like in this type of faction or whatever, overlapping factions, there's a lot of positive sentiment and really intelligent, talented people. I just don't think that the energy is being properly harnessed or fully. So all that I hope is to try to contribute to rectify that in whatever way I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it's there's like a feels like a Sun Tzu quote or something, like it's the logistics that win the war.
Yeah, I had to actually, that hadn't occurred to me, but I'm aware of the quote, but I hadn't connected it with it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that's the idea of it. I don't think that's even anywhere close to the language, but
I've heard the phrase. Maybe that wasn't the exact quote, but I have heard that like amateurs talk about weapons, professionals talk about logistics. I think I've
yeah,
seen said, but yeah, I mean the if people who are better soldiers on paper keep losing, it's probably a logistical issue.
yeah, 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 yeah. All right, man. Well, hey, thanks so much. Talk to you later.
Thank you. Take care.